trolling Senator Elizabeth Warren as a snake, and in post after post, labeling Mayor Pete Buttigieg a rat. Two victims of this tell CNN they were so afraid of the online attacks they faced, they don't even want us to describe the circumstances for fear it would start up again. They both just questioned the politics of Bernie Sanders in a public setting, and their personal lives were exposed and attacked.
Well, just what Nick said, I think that's right. I mean, there is no Democratic establishment anymore. There's not even a Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party is a meaningless notion that the party, like the Republican Party, has been hollowed out and privatized to a large extent. There are Democratic elites, and so when we're talking about the Democratic establishment, we're really talking about a bunch of people that Nick also knows well, which really means Democratic donors.
This is the most important election in the history of our country.
This election is the most important in the modern history of this country.
The election in 2020, without hyperbole, is going to be the most important election this country has undergone in over 100 years. Not a joke.
This November's elections are more important than any I can remember in my lifetime, and that includes when I was on the ballot.
There are just 8 days left in what is the most important election of our lifetime.
Where did you guys come to a conclusion about why Clinton had such a hard time just owning that she did something wrong with the email server?
You know, I know that Russia and other forces would love us to have a debate. This is exactly what they want. They want us to have a debate about the internal structure of Hillary's campaign, what's true, what's not true. And I'm just not going to play that. I'm sorry.
Yes, we came, we saw, we died.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It's like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
You know, people have said, if you look at, for example, the heat that ended up around the bend the knee, Colin Kaepernick. Mm-hmm. Many smart people have said it actually was not effective. The Russian bots started taking that on. Yes.
But I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should be running.
It's not about.
If you're like me, one of the millions suffering from pain caused by migraine, Nurtec ODT may help. It's the only medication that can treat a migraine when it strikes and prevent migraine attacks.
Trump and the Republicans lose on Tuesday, and if they lose badly, it's not going to be because of the left, whatever that means. It's not because of the 50 Antifa black mask guys who roam around the United States breaking windows and committing mayhem, most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Rudy Giuliani, there's only three things he mentioned in a sentence, a noun and a verb and 9/11. I mean...
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
And I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. If we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
I can't do it.
We'll do it live.
Okay. Well, no.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet, welcome once again to the Politics Show, and thank you for joining me.
Yo, we here now, stupid.
There's a lot going on in the world, a lot of dichotomies, a lot of hypocrisies. In other words, it's a normal day in America. I had a bit of an experience this past Christmas holiday where I lost my job again. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat this or anything. It was definitely my fault. I lost the job because I think I low-key kind of self-sabotaged self-sabotaged a little bit. Hold on a second. Let me just fix some things here. I think I low-key self-sabotaged. And the reason for that being I can't work. I'm not the kind of person who works well under a boss. I need to be able to kind of find my own way. So to start, I wanted to this piece of tape just really kind of hit me in the right way, and I think it sums up who I am as a person. And this is your boy Joe Rogan.
I gotta go to college.
Talking.
I don't want to be a fucking loser. I gotta go to college. Remember like those days? I can remember days like when I would work like 3 different kind of jobs. I'd like deliver newspapers, drive limos, and I would do, occasionally I'd do construction if like something came up and I could get away with doing it during the day. But I was always tired. I hated those jobs. Mm-hmm. But I was like, fuck, what do I do? Like I was trying to figure out what to do. And if I didn't find stand up, oh my God, I've been so fucked.
Yeah.
I would have been so fucked. I've been so fucked because my brain was not wired for jobs. Some people can do it. Some people are awesome at it. Some people, they lock into a career and they're very happy. But for whatever it was, like with my childhood, man, my childhood was just too chaotic. I did not have any desire to be like in any sort of order where I'm like locked in. Like I was a latchkey kid. Like my parents just kind of let me out of the house. Go have fun. And like kids like that have zero desire for order. Like you're out.
So that's an interesting point that I never thought about because I am also a latchkey kid. A lot of people in my generation grew up with 2 working parents. Our parents are kind of out doing their thing. Kids had a key to the house. Hey, do your thing. My mom one of the reasons I'm such a good cook is because my mom used to leave food on the counter and I prepared dinner for my siblings as the oldest child in the family. So I relate to this pretty hard, but it gets a little bit better and you'll see why I brought it to share today. Listen.
Out there wilding with these other fucking 10-year-olds out in the street, lighting buildings on fire accidentally and finding fireworks. And we did wild shit when we were kids.
Totally.
That does not prepare you for an office job. That prepares you for just sitting in class going, fuck, I got to get out of here. Mm-hmm. Dude, my kid told me on TikTok, she found this thing that was explaining how our educational system was developed. And I was like, what? I go, you got this on TikTok? I go, what did you find out? And she was like, it was developed to turn people who are like these rural people into factory workers. Like they were literally like gearing education when they started public education to like prepare these like wild folk and put them in factories. If you think about like the kind of people that were alive, that were living in like rural Columbus, Ohio, like outside of Columbus, in where you guys are from, in like the 1900s.
Yeah.
What were those people like? The farm people, like the people that were basically just like the pioneers. They just stopped and they developed a small town. And in like 1903, if you're in that fucking town and they want to take one of those people and turn them into an office worker, like good luck.
The Youngstown was the #1 steel producing city in the world through the like 30s, 40s, 50s. And then one Monday, it all closed. So like everything that even it was built around was fucked completely. Like
Oh my God.
everything that their work ethic, everything was just always go to high school and then you work in the steel mill. Your dad worked in the steel mill, his dad.
How old were you when this was going down?
It was before I was born, but the dilapidation that it left this. Well, you can't, there was no, like, you can go chase your dreams. You can move to LA or New York. Like, that's all stuff that you had to like find out on your own. Nobody, no teacher was like, you could do anything. It was
bleak.
Yeah.
Isn't that horrible? It's such a bad vibe. It's such a bad vibe for a child to grow up in that kind of a shattered dream vibe, like a Detroit, Michigan, after the factories got pulled out of there. Like that Flint, Michigan documentary that Michael Moore did, Roger and Me, is amazing.
So we'll stop there. I think the point for me is that I'm not the kind of person who does well in a structured job where it's not like something I adore doing. You know, if you put me at the Peace Corps or something, I was like building houses for poor people or something, I could probably do that. But the job I was doing was let's call it logistics. And I fucked up almost intentionally, and I got let go. So here I am back on live stream with you guys, and let's get into it. There is a lot of news right now about Somalia. And so I wanted to start with a little bit of perspective and a little bit of criticism of the Trump administration. And this is from an article from Al Jazeera about recent strikes on Somalia. Is this loaded? 1 second. Interesting. There it is. So again, this Al Jazeera, under Trump, U.S. strikes on Somalia have doubled since last year. Why? As Trump hits the Horn of Africa, experts caution against drone strikes, saying the U.S. needs to invest in long-term peace building. And this is from the peace president, of course. Mogadishu, Somalia. Ending the United States Forever Wars was the major slogan of Donald Trump's 2024 election campaign, during which he and many of his supporters spoke out against American resources and lives being put to waste in conflicts across the globe. But on February 1st, a mere 10 days after being inaugurated a second time, President Trump announced that the U.S. had carried out airstrikes targeting senior leadership of ISIS in Somalia. These killers, who were found hiding in caves, threatened the United States, his post on X read. This marks Trump's first military action overseas, but it wouldn't be his last. In the time since, the U.S. has provided weapons and support to Israel in its wars on Gaza and the Middle East. It has launched airstrikes on Yemen and even attacked Iran's nuclear facilities. At the same time, in the Horn of Africa, U.S. strikes have more than doubled since last year, according to AFRICOM, which is U.S. African Com. So I have to wonder with this stuff, and this is just me wondering out loud. Help me out if you think I'm dead wrong about this, but if you're the president of the United States, right, and you get into this massive government apparatus, a lot of this stuff is already in motion, right? Like strikes on Somalia, for example. That is like a lot of these stuff was already being planned when he was elected. And so I think, I'm not trying to shield or defend Trump in any way, but I think in a lot of ways, stuff like this, it's almost like he just has to kind of take it as it comes and roll with the punches, even though he's like, hey, look, I'm trying to shut this down. Because I covered in last week's stream about how they're moving to get rid of the AUMF, the authorized use of military force that the Bush era, Bush administration used to launch multiple wars, and the Obama administration used to launch multiple wars. And that got me thinking that maybe doing something of that nature will pull the power back a little bit more to the executive. And, there's an argument to be made that the executive having that power isn't good. But in the case of an elected government, it actually is good, because it's more likely that the executive represents the will of the people he was just elected by, I think, than maybe, the powers that be that are at play, behind the scenes that want to, launch strikes against Mogadishu, for example. But that's just my speculation, and maybe if you're in the military or something, you can comment on that with some clarity for me. But that's my take. AFRICOM, which oversees U.S. military operations on the continent, has carried out at least 43 strikes in Somalia in 2025, according to think tank New America, which tracks strikes in AFRICOM data. More than half of those which are conducted in coordination with Somalia's federal government. There you go. There's an interesting kind of subtext that you don't really get from the headlines. It's in coordination with Somalia's government, which the U.S. is probably propping up. We probably, just like we do, have been doing historically in all these countries, propping up the leaders we like and giving them military funding and backing at a price. Then you got to let our companies come in and rape your natural resources type thing. It's a quid pro quo type deal there. Okay, so coordinated with the ISIL affiliate in the northeast Puntland state, while the remainder targeted al-Shabaab. So they targeted ISIS Somalia. So they're working with the government is their excuse to target ISIS. The uptick in U.S. airstrikes targeting IS Somalia appears to be linked to growing concerns that the group has become a hub for regional and global ISIL affiliates in terms of financing and attacks, according to U.S. officials. At the same time, experts also note the recent worrying gains being made by al-Shabaab in Somalia. Of course, U.S. experts are going to note that. But why this is a war why is this a war the Make America Great Again Trump administration has an increasing hand in, especially given decades of U.S. policy in Somalia having been marred by controversy, disaster, and failure? That's a good question. So this is going to go way into the details, but it's kind of basically laying out how every president has been, from back to George W. Bush, has been screwing around in Somalia and working with their federal government to target terrorists. So that brings me to the next layer of my Somalia coverage today. And I don't know if you saw this, but there has been a lot of these stories. And I know that these stories are a thing because hell yeah. I was just checking the comments. Thank you for that. Thank you, Truth, by the way, for that comment. I appreciate that, brother. So you've seen, so back to my kind of train of thought here. The way that I kind of know what's going on in conservative thought circles, especially kind of the old school, is through family members. So I have a relative who will send me these videos. And she sent me these videos recently, and I'm going to show you. I'm just going to show them to you. And here's the first one. And this is from Minnesota. So check this out. This is big on TikTok right now.
We're in the middle of a strip mall here inside of this. We're in the middle of a strip mall here inside of this neighborhood.
In fiscal year 2025, this facility, which has its license for 74 kids, was paid $1.26 million in tax money. And there are no kids, and all the facilities are the same way, all of them.
Let's see if anyone opens.
Yeah, let's see.
Once again, I try to find a spot for my son Joey, and they would not open the door. I want to put my son Joey in daycare. Cuz I need a spot to put my son Joey.
Yes.
Is this your daycare center?
No, I work there. What's happened?
I just want to put a child in daycare, but all the daycare centers seem to be closed. No one's opening the doors.
You work here?
I was, yeah. What's happened?
Where are the kids?
Yeah?
It says it's licensed for 74 children. Right here, state of Minnesota. Where are the kids? They got paid $1.26 million in fiscal year 2025. It says they have a capacity for 74 children.
When?
Where are the kids? Right here. State of Minnesota website. You work here and you don't know?
I don't know. I was there before. I don't know what's going on.
So, okay, right off the bat, to me, this has this kind of racial overtone to it where it's kind of like hey, look at these Somali people, look at these black Somali people in Minnesota stealing your tax dollars type thing. And listen, I'm not saying that makes it defensible. I think that they should definitely continue investigating this, and they're going to like investigate it deeper. But that's the problem with these independent journalists, and I'm very happy that the independent journalism world exists. But stuff like this gets taken and spread before it's too late. And I've seen actually even Joe Rogan fall for this kind of stuff. You have to approach every goddamn thing you see on the internet with an attitude that this could be fake. That's just the attitude you have to have. So with this stuff here, right off the bat, I'm like, okay, any kid with a phone can approach these buildings and have these documents and wave these things and interview people and clip together this thing that looks incriminating pretty quickly. And so then right off the bat, you have, and it looks, and most people, myself included, are going to trust it more than they would like a news report, given the last, the track record of the news. But that doesn't automatically mean that guys like this are onto something. You always have to be skeptical of this kind of stuff. So here's another, let me let him finish for a second here.
Were there any kids when you worked here?
He's there. Kids there.
How many?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah.
You worked here. Okay, well, then you're not of any help.
Can I put my son in a daycare here?
No, I don't know.
Can I speak to someone?
No, I don't know.
No? Yeah, I would like to see if I can put my son Joey here.
Who's your son, Joey?
My son Joey. Can I check out daycare center?
No!
Do you put your kid here in this daycare?
No.
There is one child in there. Yeah, I'd like to know if this is a legit business.
Me, I'm scared of you too. How come I explain everything?
You're scared of me?
Like this poor lady has no clue what's going on too. I'm sure she's just like at her job or whatever. And who knows? There could be a valid explanation for this. Maybe the kids are on a field trip. Maybe they're not in the building because they're like in a different room watching a movie or on the playground or something. There is, I have a lot of questions after.
Yeah, because of your curry.
Because of my color. You said you're scared of me because of my color. Does that make you a racist?
Yeah, no.
Oh my God. So again, yeah, right off the bat from these videos that my conservative aunt sent me, this is the vibe I got. And I tweeted this out the other day. But this is the vibe that these videos gave me, which is this whole thing about Somalis in Minneapolis translated. Hey, conservatives, you're supposed to hate black people, not Israel. Focus. Focus, guys. These are the enemies, not the massive war state that's sucking away all your money. Now, again, I don't think that this is irrelevant, and I do think it's worth obviously looking into deeper and finding, getting explanations or whatever. Anything that's getting federal tax dollars deserves scrutiny, whether it's Somali daycares, whether it's Jeffrey Epstein, was Jeffrey Epstein getting federal tax dollars? I'm sure he was in some form or not. Maybe not. Maybe he was just getting private donations from the Clintons. Don't quote me on that. I think I'm getting a little off the rails in my commentary here, but let's get back to this.
You said you're scared of me because of my color.
I'm not saying you're racist.
You said you're scared of me because of my color.
Just to stop again for a second, one of the reasons this again kind of triggered my spidey senses is right off the bat, this kid's like, oh, I'm the victim. You're scared of white people. You're a racist. Like all of a sudden he has this like total, there's a certain country in the Middle East that plays that card very frequently. So when I see people doing this kind of shit, I'm not saying that this kid is working for the IDF or something. I'm just saying that it's a tactic that instantly makes me suspicious of people. Let's put it that way.
Color, that makes you a racist. So right now, they're all getting mad because he's showing the paperwork of this business being registered as a business. 74 children, no children.
And yes, I realize the irony of like my first reaction to this is maybe it's kind of racist. I don't think it's racist as much as a diversion, right? Like you could say, I think it's racist in the sense that you pointing out that it's Somalis and black people in Minnesota kind of triggers these older conservatives' racial tendencies. I don't want to call my relative racist. I don't think that she's genuinely racist. And we also talked about previously, I think, the difference between like ignorance. There's an ignorant form of racism where it's people who just don't know any better because they're kind of sheltered or shielded and they kind of live maybe rurally. They haven't been around different ethnicities. They're not from the city. Maybe they were just raised sheltered. There's that kind of racism. And I think that's much more forgivable, especially when people correct. And then there's malicious racism, which is not forgivable, which is like visible, like, hey, this person hates you because you're from this ethnic group or this religious group or whatever. That racism is always bad, but that's rarely the racism that you see anymore. So, just to call myself out a bit, I kind of use that angle opening this piece, and forgive me for being a slight bit of a hypocrite for that, because like I said, it's more about the idea to me that this is a diversion than it is that it's like some racism shit.
Saw one child when the lady opened up the door, but now they're all getting mad.
What was this money spent on? 1.26 million. What was that money spent on? There aren't any kids.
Ask the owner and the kids.
Well, then why are you talking for the owner if you're telling me to talk to the owner?
I'm sorry. I'm not understand what you're talking about.
See, and this is the thing, just the way that this is framed and the way that these guys. Here's another one. Let me show you this other video because this one's a little bit more, I guess, mainstream coverage related, but
multiple individuals involved have already been arrested and are now cooperating with investigators. One daycare. Minnesota's largest welfare fraud case has been exposed, and multiple individuals involved have already been arrested and are now cooperating with investigators. One daycare facility couldn't even
keep that term in mind, welfare fraud.
Spell the word learning correctly, yet still received $4 million in public funding. Independent journalist Nick Shirley attempted to enroll his son in several taxpayer-funded daycare centers across Minnesota. Every location he visited was completely empty. He then exposed what was really happening. Videos show that some of the listed daycare addresses had no children at all. Some locations were vacant buildings or private residences.
Okay.
Yet
Again, I don't know if this is legit. This might just be an AI voiceover. Videos show his very carefully edited videos show. I'm going to need a little bit more than this kid's videos show something as evidence to prove this claim. And so, fine, do a full investigation. Where is the money going? They should be able to account for it if it's federal dollars. How much are they actually getting? Because they're throwing out these figures, but this guy's 4 million. This is 1.26 million.
they had been collecting government subsidies for years. Nick Shirley and his team conducted on-site investigations, knocking on doors one by one. In front of the camera, some refused to answer, some shut the door immediately, and others suddenly changed their story, denying everything. One daycare facility specifically named in the investigation reportedly received around $1.9 million in public funds in 2025. Yet during filming and site visits, the location was completely vacant. State authorities and law enforcement have now launched formal investigations.
Okay. So formal, that's the correct answer to something like this. Formal investigations have been launched. Because if this is complete nonsense, they'll figure that out pretty quickly as soon as they start, checking their balances. But if it's a case of actual real legitimate fraud, good. We need to root that out everywhere. However, something like this pales in comparison to the levels of fraud we're seeing in other areas of our government. And this was summed up very eloquently by your boy Owen Schroyer here, who said, if you think Minnesota fraud was bad, wait till you hear about Ukraine. And that, I think, is such a fantastic point, because you have to put this into perspective. And like I said, it is a little suspicious, the whole race angle to it, and the fact that they're bombing Somalia. So it's almost like in the media, the controlled media, this can become a story that can take people's minds off what has been the story lately, especially in conservative circles, what's splitting their party in half, I don't think it's even half. I think it's more like a 80-20 split. But that is, of course, the Gaza issue. And then this other kind of stuff that's going on in the peripheral. Venezuela, another thing. And I don't let me see what are you saying here? This is 100% about the Z10. Oh, Z10 public. They're never specific about what exact personnel benefits or what exact public official to blame will get charged. Never. Yeah, it seems like it's PR. It seems like I said, it seems like a move to get the public discourse to shift to a different U.S. like conflict / problem. And again, I think if they find some legit fraud here, go for it. But like Owen said here, this pales in comparison to what's going on in a country like Ukraine. Just kind of let me slow down for a second and really put this into perspective, right? What are the figures they were mentioning in these videos, right? It's like one was like $4 million, one was like $1.2 million, one was like so all in, if we're being really generous, we're talking about maybe $20 million going to this daycare fraud, and that's that's if you assume that none of the money was actually spent on the daycares. Once they actually do this investigation, you may see, even if like a small percentage of it was spent on the daycares, then you can go, okay, well, of the 20 million that was given to this daycare system, maybe like 3 million of it got spent. So 17 million of it is fraud. So you got, let's say, just as a ballpark figure, you got $17 million worth of fraud there. $17 million worth of fraud. Now, how much money has the U.S. sent to Ukraine recently? That's what I just asked Google here. U.S. has committed significant aid to around 175 to 180 billion. So 20 million is a tiny, tiny drop in the bucket compared to the massive thievery these crooks in Eastern Europe are doing. And let's not just blame them. Obviously Lindsey Graham is implicated here. Let me just pull this up real quick. This is another little nugget I have for you
about Senator Graham. There will be news coming out in the next couple of months about how he has profited financially off of money that came out of Ukraine, laundered through Latvia, and made its way into his bank account. And we're talking significant amounts of money. Department of Justice is looking at it.
All right, those are serious allegations leveled by former CIA officer Larry Johnson. We shall see.
And let me say something about Senator Graham.
Yeah, so there you have it. That to me is, I'm not saying we should not investigate this, and if parties are guilty of committing fraud, they deserve the punishment. But there is this double tier justice system, and we've all known this for ages. It's like that what's that quote? If you kill one, you're a murderer, but if you kill many, you're a conqueror type thing. It's like if you steal $5, you're a thief, but if you steal 5 billion, you're a genius. You're a businessman who made a mistake, or you're an actor from a foreign country. So again, just going back full circle here, I think that with these things like I was just showing you with Somalia, and even with Venezuela, and some of these conflicts that are still kind of rumbling around the world, a lot of this stuff that's going on was planned long before Trump became the executive. So that AUMF thing to me is a push in the right direction. And I know it's I hate doing this because I always feel like people are gonna go like, oh, well, he's just defending Trump now. And I'm not. But my tack on all this stuff is always like, okay, if the media's collectively saying something, like I'm pretty sure it's 99% bullshit. And so when they're all on the same page on stuff, like the Epstein files is another good example of this. Just a quick sidebar. Look, release all the files, go after all the people, prosecute anyone who's guilty of crime, but also what is this going to change? Like, it's just a story. Like, what is it? Do you think they're going to be able to pull Trump out of office because of something in the Epstein files? No, they couldn't even fucking kill the guy. They couldn't even like sue him out of office with like through actual legal channels with all the power that they had. So like, no, that is not going to happen. And then like I saw Keaton Russ the other day saying they thought Trump was going to step down or something by the end. I'm like, dude, really? You really think? I mean, they're making bold predictions and stuff. I don't think that they. But think about who you're talking about here. Like, this guy is the most egotistical, self-centered, self-aggrandizing man. Like, he's going to just go early because they want JD Vance to look good on his way in. No way. So anyway, long story short here, I do think that a lot of this, war rhetoric, like this, like I said, these bombings in Somalia, the push in Venezuela. Remember, they tried to topple Venezuela last time Trump was president with Guaido. People like completely forget about this shit, and the Democrats are all behind it. The Democrats are all cheering him. Nancy Pelosi's like, Juan Guaido's the real president of Venezuela. So to me, that's another side of this kind of issue, or another angle of this issue that a lot of people aren't really thinking about is, it's a bipartisan thing. And the fact that the Democrats are like on board with it, to me, shows the MAGA people that it's like, hey, this isn't good for MAGA, priorities. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens there. And I also think that speech that Trump gave, it almost felt like a troll, because everyone thought that he was going to announce a war with Venezuela. And he just came up like, I'm the best president ever. We've never seen anything like this. It's the most amazing country ever. Oh my God. That's what he does. Like, but I say all this because the next thing I want to show you here is the most current status of this Ukraine war, because it's, despite the efforts of the neocons in the US and Europe to keep this going, I think it's going to end. It's this is so good. So this is Alex Christoforou from the Durin. And this is really good, but I love that he throws these in here. This is too good. Let me share this with you real quick.
Once it sounds a little strange, but I was explaining to the president, President Putin.
This is my video update on this Monday afternoon, December the 29th, coming to you from Larnaca, Cyprus. Let's talk about some news, and let's start things off with the meeting in Mar-a-Lago between U.S. President Trump and Zelensky. I like it. I like it a lot, that meeting with Zelensky. If you like this video, hit the like button. Also, share this video and subscribe to this channel. Let's get into it. Trump met with Zelensky for quite a while. I believe 2 to 3 hours. That was how long he was meeting with Zelensky. It was Trump and I believe Rubio, Witkoff, Kushner. Who else was there? I think Hegseth was also there. I think I saw a photo with Susie Wiles at the table as well. And the meeting was taking place at Mar-a-Lago. Trump spoke with Putin ahead of time before the meeting with Zelensky he had a 1 hour and 15-minute phone call with the Russian president, Ushakov, Putin's presidential aide. He said that the phone call was very, very cordial, friendly, businesslike. And Ushakov said in the readout that the two presidents agreed that a ceasefire would not work. No unconditional ceasefire, not even for a 60-day referendum. It would be counterproductive for a ceasefire. And they agreed to set up working groups. The phone call between Trump and Putin, according to Ushakov, was on Trump's directive.
So it's just like, and again, this is just my perspective as someone who I think is kind of middle of the road on this, is that you see how hard they're pushing to keep this Ukraine war going. So to me, it just makes sense that if they can keep problems popping up in other areas like Somalia, Venezuela, Gaza, whatever, it serves them to keep the focus off this thing being closed down. And, you know, I think that's another reason I'm kind of still giving Trump a little bit of slack on these types of things, because there's so much in motion when the new president comes in that it's almost like you have to pull the brakes, and even then it's going to skid for, you know, another year or whatever, you know, because it's a gigantic fucking freight train with a lot of momentum.
Assistance. So they initiated the phone call, the United States with Russia, and Ushakov said that it is the U.S.'s idea to move forward with working groups. Two working groups, one for economics and one for security. So that was the Ushakov readout. Trump speaking with Putin before he met with the Green Goblin, who was dressed very nice attire from Zelensky. Still no tie, but he was dressed in a nice
Here, let me jump
black
up here because there's a point when he
jacket
shows
and shirt. Without a doubt, the most dapper I have seen Zelensky in the last train. And Trump said that it's a shame. I believe he used the word, it's a shame that Americans died in a foreign country. I think I got that quote right. And I think the question was, what do you say about 100 Americans dying in Ukraine? We've reached the 100 mark. It's probably a lot more than that. And we're talking about mercenaries. They just can't use the word mercenary, and I don't think they can use the word.
It's funny they can't say, like, first of all, why are Americans dying? Like, when they ask that question to Trump as an own, like, oh, guess what, dude? 100 Americans have died now. Why are Americans fucking dying in there? You told us there weren't Americans fighting in this war. This is all like, oh, it's great for us because we can use these people as cannon fodder and get all their resources and all that shit. There's a point when he shows this tweet, and that wasn't the one I wanted to show, but I think he gets into it a little bit later here. Let me make sure, because Trump basically says Putin wants to see Ukraine succeed. I think, is this it? It's so good. It's just like, because this is the thing I love about Trump too, that he says stuff like this. I admittedly, I just have to admit that I love this because it makes people are so delusional about this. People live in this bubble where this is still like 1980 and the Russians are the big bad commies and we're fighting against this communist force that's trying to take over Europe. People really believe that. So when he says Russia wants to see Ukraine succeed, it just, these people, I can only imagine the level of meltdowns that they have over this.
Because he's not bringing the results. And so now you have Zelensky on his way to Kiev. Interesting developments. So that's an update there on Project Ukraine.
I should have done a better job.
So there was a strange report that came out the other day, which claims that the United States has already hit inside of Venezuela. They've already hit a drug facility, allegedly inside of Venezuela, that is tied to the shipping of the drugs, to the shipping route. The interesting part of this story is that none of this has been confirmed by the Pentagon, by the State Department, or by the Venezuelan government. And what this is based on is a Trump statement, Trump hinting at some sort of a strike into Venezuela.
All right, let's not get into that right now. Where's the? I think it's at the beginning here. I just want you to see this clip of him saying Putin wants.
Russia wants to see Ukraine succeed. Once it sounds a little strange, but I was explaining to the president, President Putin.
This is my video update on this Monday.
I love that.
They can't use the word American soldier either, or NATO soldier, or anything like that. So he was asked about that, and he said it's a shame that they had to die in a foreign country. And then Trump also said, it's all coming back to me now, what they were saying. One last point here. Trump also told Zelensky to take a deal. Take a deal. Because according to Trump, the issue of territory and Donbass, Russia's going to take it in a couple of months, he said. So he told Zelensky, he looked at Zelensky and he said, you should probably take a deal, right? Because Russia's going to take Donbass, which is an incredible admission from.
See, and again, I welcome this level of realism in our foreign policy. Russia's going to take the entire country unless you fucking make a deal. And these guys, anyway, let me let him finish because he touches on some other good stuff here.
The president of the United States, right? He's basically saying that he has the information now, which clearly shows that the Russian military is advancing along the front line and is capturing significant territory. And as Putin said a couple of days ago, Russia is going to capture Donetsk, and the whole terms about Ukraine withdrawing from Donetsk that are in all of the peace plans for Russia, that's going to be meaningless in a couple of months. And Trump pretty much told Zelensky, you should just take a deal because Russia's going to capture Donbass pretty soon anyway. So that was also an amazing statement from Trump. Look, all in all, Trump, at least during this press conference, and it looks like during the meeting with Zelensky, he held firm to what was discussed back in Alaska. After Alaska, he went.
And honestly, these guys on the Durin were saying before this meeting that Trump shouldn't take the meeting with Zelensky because he has nothing to discuss. Zelensky's going to try to milk more money out of him, which we just sent, I think, another 800 million. Just off the cuff recently, I think was the figure. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, or we committed to another 800 million.
Different routes. And he thought that he could perhaps defeat Russia militarily. With the advice of Kellogg, he decided to go with Kellogg and the neocons, and he thought that, and the Europeans, he thought that they could defeat Russia militarily. He decided to go with Besant and try to defeat Russia through sanctions. But it all failed. And it looks like he's trying to get back to what was agreed on in the United States in Anchorage. So that's a summary of the meeting between Trump and Zelensky. As far as the Europeans go, what about the Europeans? Well, the Europeans were a no-show. They were not at these meetings. And I think everything can be summed up by this post from Poland's leader, Donald Tusk, who posted on X, "Good luck, Zelensky." That sums up everything as far as where the Europeans are at. Of course, the Europeans are going to try to sabotage any return to Alaska, any return to June 2024 Istanbul Plus. They're going to do their very best to sabotage everything. And Donald Tusk, well, his message to Zelensky, to the world, as far as the Europeans go, is we're a no-show, but we wish the Green Goblin good luck. We're irrelevant in all of this. We've been marginalized. But hey, Volodymyr, I wish you good luck. So a lot of outlets are saying this was a victory for Zelensky because Trump did not chew him out. Right? There are some magazines, there's some Bild is one. I don't know, is Bild a magazine or a newspaper or whatever. There are some publications which are saying that this is a victory because Zelensky did not get pummeled by Trump like he got last time he was.
So it's funny that he said what he said about Europe being irrelevant because with Europe, the only reason they were ever relevant in this conflict is because of the myth that Europe was next, that Putin was trying to take over all of Europe and Ukraine was like the first domino. Once that reality is once that myth was debunked, now what? What are you guys doing? Why would you funnel billions of more dollars into this conflict when it's very clear that That's not what Putin is trying to do. And if you've ever listened, that's Russian propaganda to say this, but if you ever listen to the guy talk, he's never. So one more time, I got to play this clip.
Russia wants to see Ukraine succeed. Once it sounds a little strange, but I was explaining to the president, President Putin.
This is
President Putin wants to see Ukraine succeed. You know, the funny part is, again, I don't necessarily think that's incorrect. It's a situation where, you know, I think Russia has acted with a lot of restraint when you really consider what's been going on. You know, they could have gone a lot harder than they did. And I think, you know, Putin, he gets a lot of credit for being a very deft politician and leader, you know. And it does, I'm not disrespecting our system, but I think it does, for a country like Russia, for example, you know, they needed that continuity of leadership to get them out of the rut they were in. And I think, you know, just to go back to what I was saying earlier with Trump and like this idea that it's a freight train that you're pulling the brakes on and it's going to slide for another year. I think that's a pretty good analogy. And one of the reasons I would give him just a little bit of slack on some of this stuff. And see how it pans out in the coming days, because everyone's opposed him on this in the media and in the establishment, and it's just not good. So let's talk a little bit about Nick Fuentes. And I tend to agree with Kurt Metzger's take on Nick Fuentes, that he's kind of a little gremlin who they bring out to get his stink on people. But also, you can't deny the influence he has on the modern political dialogue. And I respect the guy. I mean, yeah, he says a lot of stuff that's edgy and kind of like, you know, it's, I think in most cases, trolling. But also, he's a very intelligent, well-spoken dude. And I might not agree with him on everything, particularly the Candace Owens stuff. But it's clear when you hear the guy talk why he has the audience that he does, because he's pretty polished. He's a pretty talented broadcaster. He has a good, solid, like almost radio-esque voice, and he's a decent-looking dude, and he's intelligent. He's clearly someone who knows the issues and thinks them through in a rational way. And so recently, he debated Dinesh D'Souza on I think it was Alex Jones's InfoWars channel. So I want to show a little bit of this. Well, actually, I'm just going to show Kim Iverson's coverage of it. Kim Iverson, honestly, is underrated. I think Kim Iverson does a solid job just as like a news show, kind of reporting down the middle. So props to Kim Iverson for doing a great job as a journalist. Maybe not even a journalist, but a political commentarian. She's one of the better ones, I believe. So
it's this debate, which you might have. I know a lot of people saw it, but it's 3 hours long, so a lot of people missed it. Nick Fuentes and Dinesh D'Souza.
Yeah, that's why I'm stealing your highlights, Kim. Thanks.
Debated over America First foreign policy on Alex Jones's platform. So Alex Jones hosted the debate. And what's really interesting about this is you have three highly censored people, right? Alex Jones, obviously,
so let me jump
doing whatever Israel wants.
People run away from them. I don't run away from them.
Okay. Well,
do it because
let's go ahead and start with Dinesh D'Souza was the first to be able to give his kind of opening remarks, and let's listen to what he had to say.
Thank you, Alex. Welcome, Nick. I am looking forward to our debate, and you know, it's I'm thrilled to do it because free speech has been under attack, and you guys, Alex, Nick, Laura Loomer, and others have been deplatformed. I am a strong opponent of all of this, and for this reason, even though some people are like, "Why do you want to debate Nick Fuentes?" I'm like, "No, there are taboo issues here that are being raised. They're not being adequately discussed. Some people run away from them. I don't run away from them. I think it's a good idea to sort of have it out, and so that's really why I'm here."
Respect to him for doing that too. I mean, you're going to see the way that he kind of dances around some of these issues. But
I want to defend Trump. I want to defend MAGA, Make America Great Again. I want to defend America First. Seems to me we have a big disagreement here about what America First means, and that's what I want to talk about. When we talk about making America great again, it's important to think about what made America great in the first place. Now, one obvious answer to that is that America became great by kind of looking inward and attending to its own problems, going back to the founders. But that is not only not entirely true, it's not true at all. Right after the American founding, Thomas Jefferson found out that there were these Barbary pirates in the Middle East. Now, they weren't attacking America. They weren't starting a war over here. But Jefferson basically dispatched an armed force to clobber them, to beat the heck out of them. Why? Because they were disrupting our interests. They were disrupting our trade. They were hurting our position in the world. So even though we had this infant democracy, clobbering bad guys is something that we started doing from the very beginning. Now, fast forward to,
So he's making the world police argument. And it's interesting to watch this because what a guy like Dinesh D'Souza has been deployed to do, clearly, is try and reframe MAGA as a neocon project. And I think of all the agents they've deployed to do this, he probably does the best job intellectually, but you can tell it's still obviously bullshit. And it might work on like boomers and people his age who like lick his boots and think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But for most rational people who have the type of, the view of history that Nick Fuentes has, you'll see it's not going to fly. But again, credit to him for at least being, out here defending himself publicly.
And let's talk about the middle of the 19th century. Again, America's building a strong country. It's focused inward, but guess what? We get into a big war with Mexico. The Mexican War lasts about 4 years. We started the Mexican War. We go over there, get our troops into Mexico City, clobber the Mexicans, take a good chunk of Mexico, including a good chunk of Texas, later large parts of the country that were not part of America become added to the country, and we do this basically by force. Now, we have good reasons for it. I'm not going to go into the reasons, but the point is we did it. Fast forward now, I'm going to omit World War II and focus on Reagan. The Soviet Empire is gaining strength. The Soviet Union grabs 10 countries actually, between 1974 and 1980. They don't attack us. They're not waging war over here. And Reagan does not start a war with them either. But what he does do is he starts clobbering them in all kinds of ways. He clobbers them in Afghanistan, he clobbers them in Somalia, in Angola, in Mozambique, in Nicaragua. And we do it by supporting armed forces that are repelling these Soviet armies, and we win the Cold War. Who can deny that the world is going to...
Okay, so that's interesting. So he's calling out like the when we armed the Mujahideen as like that was a good thing. He doesn't want to talk about how that resulted in blowback that created 9/11. None of that worked out well. So but also forgive me for the speed of this. It gets a little bit better as this progresses. It'll slow down a little bit. I know it's you don't want to hear this at regular speed anyway, believe me.
Better off, and America's better off. That is America first. And that is making America great again. So when we're talking about making America great again, it has never meant, and it doesn't mean for Trump.
Making America great again means going back to doing the same shit we've always been doing, basically, is what he's saying. In a much more structured and intellectual way than a lot of his peers, but that's still what he's saying.
A kind of, isolationism. I would even deny that it means no new wars. And I say that because no president,
isolationism too. That's another, it's a, to use a term, trope that gets thrown around for people who are non-interventionist. Non-interventionist does not mean isolationism. It doesn't mean that we don't do anything at all. But this is the types of debate tactics these people have to use. They have to set up a straw man that being against, continued funding of a war in Gaza is isolationism.
A president who takes an oath to support the Constitution can make that absolute guarantee. There are all kinds of scenarios, and I'm happy to lay out about 6 of them, in which the United States would be drawn into a war. And so the pledge is made as a statement of principle, but Trump is the commander-in-chief, and it's his decision to make at a given time when the situation is dangerous enough that there should be a war. Now, there isn't a war going on in Iran, but I do want to say about the Iranians this. They are not a regional power like Iraq. This is, I think, one of the key differences. A lot of people think Iran is Iraq, and Saddam Hussein is the same as the mullahs, and Trump is the same as Bush. He's becoming like Bush. No, Iran has a global ideology, and they always have. The reason that they chant death to America, they also chant death to Israel. But death to America is the main chant, and death to Israel is the secondary chant. Why? Because we are the main enemy. We are the great Satan. Israel may be the little Satan, but we are the great Satan. And we are controlling Israel, not the other way around. At least that's how the Iranians see it. The little Satan is not telling the great Satan what to do. It's actually the opposite. The Iranian goal is a global caliphate that obviously involves global supervision, Sharia law, bringing it here, infiltrating this country, terror cells, and the nuclear weapons are just taking this global ideology and giving it enormous...
I could just imagine like the Republicans in the back room or whoever, the think tanks that sent this guy out, just like, deploy the Indian guy to recite Israeli talking points on TV.
Power. There's an old saying that says, what do you say to what you call a dictator who has nuclear weapons? And the answer is, sir. What that means is that when a guy gets nukes, he's on a completely different level. You've got to, in a sense, be deferential in a way that you otherwise wouldn't. So here's Iran.
Yep, and that's why Iran's trying to get nukes, because they're threatened by dummies like
They're cooking these nukes. They are building this uranium. They're enriching it way beyond any peaceful purposes. And Trump says, look, it's in our interest that they don't have this weapon. Yes, it's in Israel's interest as well, but we're not doing it for Israel. We're doing it because we don't want them to have a
Okay. I have to also probably tell you that we sped it up. So that's why he sounds funny. Dinesh D'Souza doesn't normally sound like that. Nick Fuentes won't sound like what you're about to hear, but we sped it up in the interest of time. It's also how I just listen.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to start out by saying as well, I appreciate Dinesh D'Souza for doing the debate. And I actually appreciate him saying that because it is true. We have both been brutally censored. And I know that Dinesh was also targeted by the Obama administration. So, we're really all sort of in the same boat in terms of we've all been persecuted to some extent. So I appreciate him saying that. But I'd like to move on and get into the subject of the debate. And I actually like how Dinesh framed it. I agree with him. The central question concerning the Iran war is, what does America first mean? What is the United States' involvement in Iran, or what should it be? And how does that conform to the stated goal of putting our country first, making America great again, and pursuing the American strategic interest? And without going into the Barbary Wars or Reagan or any of that, We don't need to go back that far. I think we need to talk about the current strategic landscape in the Middle East. And we need to get some things down first analytically before we proceed. And I'm actually going to pick up where Dinesh left off at the end and kind of start with that premise, because that is, I think, the mainstream premise. Let's say that's the status quo accepted premise of the U.S. Media or the conservative media, is that Iran is an apocalyptic regime. They have global ambitions. They're led by religious zealots and fanatics. They're racing towards a bomb because they want to attack Israel and the United States. And I would say that with that analytical framework, you probably would say that it's justified that we go to war with Iran. I would probably agree under those circumstances. But I will clarify a couple of things. Let's say that in the first place, this is not the first regime that has been described this way. When we were at war with the Soviet Union, it was conservative military planners that said the exact same thing. They said the Soviets are a nihilistic death cult. We can't negotiate with them. Khrushchev said we will bury them. They want to destroy the United States. Of course, we negotiated with them. Of course, Nixon had détente, and eventually we negotiated with Gorbachev, and the wall came down, and we didn't have to go to war. We said the same thing about Maoist China. They killed 70 million people. They're a communist death cult. We negotiate with them all the time. They joined the World Trade Organization. I don't think anybody would argue that communism is not a nihilistic global idea.
People would argue too. I've heard people argue that us negotiating with China like enabled them to become the power that they have become today. And it's like, that's a very vain point of view, because like we had anything to do with that. Well, we kind of did by outsourcing all of our business there and production and manufacturing and completely gutting our entire middle class. But China didn't do that. We did that. Our business leaders did that, not the Chinese.
Ideology with ambitions to take over the planet. It certainly did. It always had. Yet we negotiated. Let's also talk about Iran's nuclear program. And once again, let's sort of do some housekeeping. Iran does not have a nuclear bomb. They're not currently pursuing a nuclear bomb. And what you would call Iran is a nuclear threshold state. They're engaging in something, and this is technical, it's called nuclear hedging. This is where you have the technology, the expertise, and the infrastructure to make a nuclear weapon, but you don't actually build one. Why do you maintain the threshold latent nuclear status? You maintain that in the event that the security situation changes. There's a few countries, actually, not just Iran, they're in the exact same boat. And those countries are South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. They're all considered nuclear threshold states. They have the expertise, the infrastructure, the technology to make a bomb. Why do they have that expertise? Why do they make...
So already you can see the level of debate here that Nick is on. Like, Dinesh is reciting talking points and Nick is coming with actual facts here. So you got to give again, I can see why this guy has the audience he does, because he's a sharp dude.
They maintain the threshold status because they're on the doorstep of China. China is a much more powerful country, and they themselves have a native nuclear program. They engage in nuclear hedging in the event that they need to deter a threat from a regional adversary. Does this sound familiar? Why is Iran pursuing nuclear hedging? Why do they have a threshold status? They have this because Israel is the only country in the Middle East, actually, that has an undeclared nuclear weapons program. They have a nuclear arsenal of 200 bombs. They're not a signatory on the NPT. Israel's the only country with a nuclear arsenal, and they're Iran's sworn enemy. Let's also talk about the history. The United States overthrew the government of Iran in 1953. A democratically elected prime minister wanted to nationalize Iran's resources and put Iran first. He was overthrown by the CIA. The United States installed a brutal dictatorship. The Iranian people revolted against it. Ever since, the United States and Israel have been at war with Iran, and we've destroyed all their neighbors. We went into Iraq and overthrew Saddam Hussein.
Okay, so Alex Jones was keeping the time there, making sure that everybody kept to their 5 minutes throughout the entire debate, which was, again, about 3 hours long or something. It was a...
There is just like this, and, forgive me if this sounds... I'm trying to be cordial here, but I do believe there is this engine in the United States from the conservative movement that says it is about Islam. This is Glenn Beck's book. This is sort of the Fox News mantra. It is Islam. Islam is the problem. And I'm not an Islamist. I'm a Catholic. I'm not pro-Islam. And I wouldn't even call myself pro-Iran. I'm pro-America. And to sort of narrow the discussion, let's talk about Islamism. Let's talk about jihadism. I agree with you. There is an element of jihadism in the Middle East. There are these radical Muslims that they want to return to the faith of the pious ones, the ancient Muslims, the first 2 or 3 generations of Muslims. They come from Saudi Arabia. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Iranian-backed groups do not attack Americans on American soil. They're not global powers. They're local powers. They're regional powers. They don't attack the United
States. Dinesh thought he was going to trot out this like 2000s era, Bush era, Muslims are scary talking point in 2025, and Nick's just like totally taking it down. You got to give the guy his flowers.
United States. They may attack the United States in Beirut or Iraq because the United States is in their territory. We're in the Middle East. We're in their neighborhood. We're backing Israel's brutal war on Lebanon in the 80s, where they commit massacres, castrating people, scalping people, brutal atrocities that are well documented that Israel, their own commission blames Ariel Sharon for this, the defense minister. So, they don't attack us on our soil. The terrorists that do attack us are Wahhabist. They're Salafist. That comes from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia spent billions of dollars promoting Wahhabism, which is the ideology of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS. We backed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. We backed bin Laden. We do arms deals with Saudi Arabia. And you know what? to some extent, this radicalism is going away. And it came from Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, these other places. And it's going away because we made a deal with Mohammed bin Salman. We did arms deals throughout. We're allies throughout, buy oil from them throughout. We didn't invade Saudi Arabia and install a Western liberal democracy. We don't like your regime. We're going to drop bombs on you. We negotiated with them over time. And by the way, they were the biggest problem. As far as Iran is concerned, it's important to analytically determine their strategic interest, because that's how you determine what we have to do about it. Israel wants regime change in Iran. That's why Iran wants a bomb to deter this, which is a credible fear. Now, the United States won't let Iran have the bomb. Now, if you want to give Iran the Soviet Union treatment and bankrupt them through maximum pressure and sanctions, that's what we were doing. But you're calling for regime change. We didn't do regime change in the Soviet Union. We allowed them, and we went in there, actually. George Bush managed it, I think, in a good way. We managed a peaceful transition of power after a long period of soft power and smart power that we used against them. You're saying we need to go in and invade Iran, or not maybe invade Iran, but force them to have regime change with CIA operations, foreign media, maximum pressure sanctions, backing Israeli operations. And I would say that's not in America's interest. That's what Israel wants. That's not what we want. You're an anti-Semite. Regime change has a terrible track record from Libya, Egypt, Iraq, Syria. There's zero success stories. I think that I agree with you in some sense.
Bring in Douglas Murray's
we don't want a nuclear Iran, but we need to understand why we're on the threshold of one. And that has to do with Israel's ambitious and aggressive actions. In my opinion, the move is restrain Israel, stop them from attacking Iran, get Iran to come back to the table, and try to get them to agree to some kind of framework like the JCPOA.
Yeah, that is a very strong argument.
Yeah, that's the argument anyone with a brain is making, on the left or the right. Let's be honest. I mean, well, let's not be honest, because let's be honest that the left has been bad on this issue too. I don't think that they have any, outside of maybe like Kahana, I don't think they really have any credibility whatsoever on the Middle East. If Kamala Harris had won the election, we would not even be having this conversation, and I can guarantee you that. We'd be girl bossing genocide.
I am against all foreign lobbying. I am against all foreign money. And the problem with this is, you talk about Sheldon Adelson, you say, well, he's an American citizen, so what would you do about him? Well, let me ask you about Sheldon Adelson. Yes, American citizen, born and raised in Northeast. Sheldon Adelson, when he died, his body was flown to Israel, where he was buried, and the body was greeted on the tarmac by Benjamin Netanyahu. Sheldon Adelson said he wished he served in the...
So, honestly, too, I just want to say that, Nick Fuentes has definitely said things that are obviously trolly anti-Semitic, but when you hear people that are making these points, it's very clear where this, like, oh, you're a racist who needs to be deleted from the debate come from. And I think a guy like Nick Fuentes, who's from a different era, who's from the younger generation, is one of those people who's like, okay, you're going to call me a Nazi? Fuck you, I'm a Nazi. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that do that because it doesn't matter what you say or do, they're going to call you a racist. Tucker Carlson was a great example of that. And I think now a lot of the smarter people on the left have come around and realized that was nonsense. The idea that Tucker Carlson is some racist white nationalist pig is a perception that was drummed up by the corporate media to keep you from listening to anything that the guy says. Does he make bad points sometimes? Of course. Does he make points I don't agree with sometimes? Yeah, all the time. But you can tell when you listen to a guy like him, he's coming from a place of integrity. He's telling you what he actually believes. And again, that's why a guy like Nick Fuentes has the audience that he has. It's not because America's racist and hates Jewish people. It's not because everyone's dumb and the internet tricked people into believing conspiracies. It's because the guy speaks with integrity and he's smart. He's clearly not, and there's some debate to be had. Like I said, his takes on the Canada and stuff are a little bit on the Fed side, if I'm being honest. However, he has a right to that take, and I'm not going to fall into that trap of accusing everyone who has a take that I don't agree with as being a Fed, because that's like the new Nazi. Fed is the new Nazi. That's my slogan now. Fed is the new. That's what as soon as someone gets over the target, they're like, oh, that guy might be working with the CIA. He has an audience and he's saying true things. Ian Carroll, another good. Anyway,
the IDF and not the U.S. military. He said, my heart is in Israel. He lobbied the Trump administration to pardon Jonathan Pollard, who is an Israeli spy, stealing our secrets.
His face. So it's great because Nick's like, who cares if he's an American citizen? Look at where his loyalties clearly lie.
And giving them to Israel. This was something he lobbied for 10 years. Like, this guy clearly was a foreign agent. Do you see any sort of problem with that? I mean, don't you think that his citizenship is sort of a technicality, or do you take any issue at all with his clear foreign allegiance to the state of Israel?
Listen to his response.
Look, all I'm saying is that there are numerous examples of Americans, homegrown, who have, for some reason or another, fallen in love with some foreign country. I mean, I'll give some examples. There were countless Americans who went
What about
to the Soviet
Adelson? What, do you
Union.
have a problem with that?
Yes, of course I do. Of course I do. But
Okay.
I'm just saying that
Fair,
there's
good
nothing
answer.
uniquely Israeli about it. Think of all the Sandinistas. Think of all the Americans who went down there. Think of the number of Americans who went and fought in the Spanish Civil War. They were obviously putting other countries first.
Okay, here's the difference, Dinesh. How much influence did the Sandinistas have over the United States government? How much did they have? Zero. In fact, probably the opposite. I think the US government probably did everything the opposite of anything the Sandinistas wanted. So yeah, of course there are people in America who have loyalties to other countries in that respect. But you have to ask yourself, are they at the level of Sheldon Adelson? Also, back in those days, money wasn't speech, and Citizens United wasn't a thing where you didn't have a Sheldon, these corporate overlords who could just buy a politician and, fill them like an empty vessel with their agenda. I mean, of course you had that to some degree, but not to this level, not to the level where it's an individual person like a Sheldon Adelson publicly shilling for another country, and buying the government, through his widow now. But again, I do think Dinesh D'Souza, of all the people I've heard this come out with on the pro-Zionist side, he's actually doing the best job. But that's like being the skinniest kid at fat camp,
There were many Americans. Look at the Rosenbergs. They spied against the United States for the Soviet Union. Klaus Fuchs. So what I'm getting at is there's an American tradition of Americans who, for
the
whatever
Rosenbergs weren't they like hung or something? Like it's like, okay, the analogy kind of works if there was any accountability for the current thing that Nick just asked you about, like that. That's not. It's a good straw man. If I'm being totally intellectually honest, it's just not. It's kind of diluting an argument that has a very potent point.
reason, sometimes ethnicity, sometimes ideology, they start putting another country first. Are you asking me if that's wrong? Yes, it is. And I think when they break the law, they should be punished, as the Rosenbergs, of course, were put to death. Klaus Fuchs was
you're
arrested.
Not taking into account, Dinesh, is that the modern law is such that the Sandinistas, if they had money back in the day, could have bought the government, could have bought a president like Sheldon Adelson did. So that's the thing that Dinesh is kind of dodging here, the real issue.
Right. So Nick brings up what a lot of us talk about a lot, which is there are clearly people in America who have not just dual loyalty, but they prefer Israel. They're clearly operating on behalf of Israel. They're more Israel first than they are the United States. But Dinesh D'Souza brings a good counter argument to that. And he's not wrong. I mean, you look at the Cuban Americans, for example. The reason why there's still an embargo on Cuba, why we haven't lifted it, even though
those are people with political power.
Castro is long dead, is because the Cuban Americans in Florida wield a lot of political power. Yeah. They wield a ton of political power. They donate to political campaigns. And they specifically, their big one issue is Cuba. They want.
I mean, you could argue the same for anything. If you look at the dynamic in the Iraq War, right? There were defectors from Iraq. And a lot of times the US goes and creates these people so we can use them as an excuse to topple a government. What's the girl's name? She testified in Iraq before the Iraq War that about all these, like, them killing babies or something. I can't remember it's always something like that like the Iraqi soldiers were like bayoneting babies or some crazy story. She testified. Turns out this girl was like the daughter of like the opposition forces from Iraq who wanted to overthrow Saddam and would wield power if the US were to do so. So, there's also that dynamic you have to take into account with any of these factors. But
want down with Cuba. And they make that their priority. That is not about America. Here's Dinesh saying, well, and he's dead serious. He says, the only conclusion I could come up with is I think Nick must be
okay, so this is so good. And this is when Dinesh D'Souza officially loses the debate, and we'll cap it off here, but this is fantastic. Just listen. I'm sad that she didn't get Nick's response.
Democrat.
Listen to what he
Watch
says.
this.
So to sum up sort of what we've been talking about so far, the question is, what is America first? What's putting America first? I'm not pro-Iran. I'm not an isolationist, or I'm not even necessarily opposed to the United States engaging other countries abroad. What I am opposed to is a policy that isn't in our interest. And I think that regime change is something that historically in the Middle East never goes our way. It leads to chaos, civil war, ethnic cleansing, failed states, worse regimes than we got before. I think the U.S. interest in Iran is to prevent them from acquiring a nuclear bomb. I don't think they're pursuing one right now. I think they have a latent threat to deter regime change from Israel. And I think that on the flip side of that, Israel's been pushing for regime change in Iran like they have in virtually every other country for 30 years. That's why the America First position, how do we balance these two competing states, which are they both have their religious zealotry. They both have their share of terrorism. Neither of them are the United States. How do we balance those competing forces in the Middle East? I think we restrain Israel from pursuing regime change in Iran. I think we make a deal with Iran to restrict their nuclear activity. Israel? And that comes from a deep respect and humility about the nature of regime change, the size of Iran, the undertaking that regime change would be, and with respect to what our own foreign policy is. I think that we had a nuclear deal with Iran and it was going well. They were abiding by it. We had monitoring. We had 24/7 cameras. We knew what they were doing. We have engaged Iran in good faith before. They've demonstrated by telegraphing strikes and through calibrating them that they're rational, that they can be patient strategically. And I think that we should attempt to do that again. I think that Trump and Biden both tried to do that over the past 12 years. They've been repeatedly sabotaged by Israel. Their dream is to drag us into a confrontation where we fight their regime change war for them. And I think that's something that serves only the interest of Israeli hegemony and not the interest of American strategic withdrawal and removal from the Middle East so that we could focus on our real rival, which is China. So that's kind of my big picture view. And it's based on fun.
And that's where I also diverge from a lot of these kind of like modern MAGA libertarian types where it's like, oh, we need to stop doing these regime change wars so we can focus on the real enemy, which is China. Maybe economically to compete with them, but to frame it as like they're our enemy, the real enemy is right here. The people who are outsourcing all of our jobs to China. But Nick makes this very like well-spoken, nuanced argument to end his section of the debate. Listen
fundamental assumptions about the nature of Iran's regime and what Iran wants. And the same is true about Israel, what the nature of the Israeli regime is and what they want. And so that's a summary of what I think the America First position is in this conflict.
All right. So you only went for like less than 3 minutes. Dinesh Souza.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief as well. I've been trying to sort of figure out Nick Fuentes as this debate has been going on.
This is what he wants to say.
I've come to a kind of startling conclusion.
You're an anti-Semite.
I mean this only tentatively because I don't know enough about Nick. But from what I'm hearing, basically Nick Fuentes is a Democrat. And what that means is that he can't be America First because he is echoing all the tired, discredited, have faith in the goodwill of our enemies, have faith in treaties. This is what Democrats said throughout Reagan, throughout the Cold War. Let's trust the Russians. They can be.
It's funny because have trust in the goodwill of our enemies. Like that's what you're supposed to do. I think it was Reagan himself who said, "Trust but verify." You know what's wrong with honoring treaties? And that's the thing. Again, these boomer ass neocon conservatives still live in that right left world where they can just go, oh, well, you're clearly a Democrat because you don't see it like me and the people who live still mentally exist in 20 years ago when we were relevant do.
Trustworthy. They want peace too, don't they? And now, we have Nick, and he's like, we had a deal. Well, it was Obama's deal, remember? You think Obama was a good guy? You think Obama was America first? What do you think Obama was up to? America last. Obama's idea was, let's strengthen our enemies. And
that seems to be Dinesh's like core kind of what's the word I would use? His go-to whipping boy, or his core defense for everything is Obama's the worst, which is definitely not a race thing either. It's just Obama was clear. And again, Trump does this too, where they act like Obama was some, and a lot of people buy it that weren't politically active during the Bush years, because if you were, you realize that Obama was basically that with a friendly face for liberals on it.
Undermine our friends. Why do you think he got rid of?
And when you think about it in that regard, when you think about how Obama literally continued the policies of the neoconservatives throughout his term, it's actually Dinesh who is the Democrat, because the Democrats have fully come over to adopt all those. They ran with Liz Cheney. He's the neocon. He's the Democrat. The Republican Party has been usurped by the Trump era, whatever you want to call it. And you still have, again, I go back to my analogy of like the freight train that you have to pull the brakes on and it's still going to slide for a while before it actually stops, and then you can back it up. These are the people that are trying to stop you from even pulling the brakes. These are the people who, and the same dynamic existed in the Bernie Sanders movement, where, you had these fresh, young, socially progressive Democrats who are ready for real change after like 8 years of nonsense Obama shit. Like, let's dress up neocon policies in liberal jack-offery. And the Democratic establishment would not allow that. They wouldn't even allow, in the case of Trump, they couldn't stop it because they didn't have super delegates in the way, super delegates, delegate, it's probably a better term. They didn't have the same level of control over the party apparatus, over the voters that the Democrats did. So they couldn't stop Trump from taking over the party. But now what they're hoping, and Steve Bannon said this, is that once he gets out, they can replace him with a stock and trade neocon, like a Ted Cruz or a Lindsey Graham, or maybe not necessarily those guys, but someone like them, and move on from this nightmare of their lost relevance. Dinesh D'Souza right here, just displaying how irrelevant he is in the modern political dialogue.
Mubarak in Egypt because he was an ally of the United States. And then we got the Muslim Brotherhood in power in Egypt. That was not, Obama is not the same as Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was an idiot. He was a nincompoop. We'll give him the Presidential Nincompoopery Award. Obama's malevolent. Obama represents, ultimately, if you follow what Obama says, it's basically what our enemies want and not what we want. And so notice, Nick, how close your position is to Obama. The Iranians are reasonable. The Iranians don't have any imperialistic ambitions. They don't have any real ill will toward Israel. Their militarization is purely defensive. We can make a peaceful deal with them. The only thing you didn't say is we should give them a whole bunch of money. I guess that's your one difference with Obama, is you wouldn't give them the pallets of cash that Obama turned over. But otherwise, you're saying pretty much the same thing. Now, here's what I'm saying, which is the opposite. In the world, America has allies and we have enemies. Our enemies, our rivals, their adversaries, they wish us ill.
Look at that.
They would do regime change over here if they could. And who are some of those people? Well, China, to some degree, Russia, certainly Iran. And so if you read Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, the whole idea is you want to weaken your enemies and strengthen your friends. That's what America First means. It means promoting American interests in the world. And you seem to be promoting the opposite. You seem to be saying, well, enemies aren't that bad, and our friends aren't our real friends. Why don't we put some pressure on our friends, and why don't we trust our enemies more? I mean, this is basically straight out the logic of the Democratic Party. It's been disproven time and time again. And I think you're wrongly drawing lessons from the Iraq War that are basically turning you into a 26-year-old Obama.
The opening salvo is Nick talking about how Dinesh supported the Iraq war and was wrong about it. But I want to close this segment out by showing you one final thing here. We'll take that with us on the way out here. Just food for thought on this particular debate as to who is the real America First candidate in this debate. I think it's pretty clear who wins in that regard when you see that. So I got one more little bit of news to speak about with you, and that is, of course, it's another Kim Iverson clip. I happen to be on a Kim Iverson tip this week. She's been doing good work, but this one's about RFK, and I think I really like this woman that she has on. Let's see. I think Nick Fuentes is a reluctant Fed. Seems he got hemmed up and has to attack certain people, but he has full advantage of being on the air as an anti-Zach. Yeah. Based on the stuff he was saying about Candace and the way Alex Jones, I've been watching on Twitter this morning. My favorite thing to do, I don't even have to post. I just go to Twitter and see what people are talking about and then go to the comments and just read, because you just get a gauge of public opinion from that. That's great. And Alex Jones is like out there like trying to prove that Candace is a liar, and just the comments are just like, dude, you sold out. You were broke a couple of years ago, and now all of a sudden you're starting to recite, Zionist talking points. So it's great. The public is wise to this shit now, and that makes me very optimistic about the future, despite how terrible things may seem at times. So getting into this is, I make no, I don't hide the fact that I'm a fan of RFK Jr. And I think that, there's obviously valid criticisms of the man to be made, but I do think the vast majority of the criticisms of him are nonsense and peripheral. Like, oh, he's weird, he does falconry, or he had an affair with Olivia Nuzzi or whatever. Like, okay, dude, people fuck. I don't know if you know this. Like, some people don't really get laid that much and don't live in a world where that's even possible, that a reporter would like send you dirty messages or whatever. But RFK is one of those dudes who comes from a wealthy background, and he's a handsome dude who takes care of himself. And so it's reality. So all that type of nonsense, they do that to Bill Clinton. I didn't care about when it was Bill Clinton. I didn't care about it when it was Anthony Weiner, I think in Weiner's case, he might've been, dabbling a little bit with the, underage side of things. But again, you look at, you may be too young to remember this, but Elliot Spitzer to me was my turning point for the sex crime thing, because Elliot Spitzer was a guy in New York who was taking on Wall Street and trying to keep them honest. And as soon as he like had some, leverage and some momentum on that, bam, he gets busted soliciting a prostitute, and actually a really good looking prostitute too. You couldn't even blame. I think she's a Playboy or something after that. So again, it's call me a pig, call me whatever you want. It's human nature. People like sex. Men, women, trans people, gay people, everyone likes sex. And to me, it's like, and again, unless they're doing something illegal there, it's nonsense. So RFK, he is up against quite the lobby in the manufactured food industry. And again, I feel like a lot of the propaganda against him, he's made a lot of enemies in high places. The Fauci book alone is probably where most of the smears come from. But it does seem like he's trying to make some moves here. And Kim Iverson recently had this woman, her name is Stacey Malkin, and she's the editor of I believe it's just a website called Right to Know, US Right to Know. And listen to this, because this is the kind of shit that, to me is even more irrelevant than electoral politics, because this is policy stuff that affects us regardless of who's president. And this is just really interesting stuff. So let me get this going here. Forgive me for my clunkiness on the load here.
The site US Right to Know, so that's usrtk.org, which we do have the link down below, titled, "Is RFK Jr. backing Big Food's drive to overturn tough new state laws?" So you're saying that the federal government is trying to make it to where states don't have their own rights, which is, again, totally against Republicans' way of supposed ethos, right? That this Republican government wants to hinder states' rights and the ability for states to say, we want to regulate our food our own way. And you're saying that RFK Jr., who is supposed to be the champion to help us all, is potentially backing this measure, which is actually driven by big food. Can you explain all of that to us?
Yeah, so here's what we do know. We know that the food industry wants to take away our rights to pass laws at the state level. We also know that states across the country, and there are many, many bills advancing. I have found at least 80 bills moving through state legislatures that would regulate food safety in some way. So these are laws, and some of them very bold, and lots of them in red states, banning food dyes, banning ultra-processed foods or restricting them in schools, requiring companies to label. This was a good one. Texas passed a law requiring companies to put a warning label on food if it contains any one of 44 ingredients that are banned in other countries. I thought that.
Way to go, Texas. What's up with Texas? Texas has been on top of it lately.
That was brilliant. It's a right to know. Like, we have a right to know if we're eating ingredients that are banned in other countries. The food industry hates this. They are literally freaking out. So they've launched a new lobbying and PR salvo, marching around Capitol Hill, trying to find a sponsor to do to make federal preemption a key tenet of a federal food safety law. So they're interested in a federal law for food safety, not to make food safer, but to take away the rights of states to pass their own laws.
So you're saying, so just real quick, sorry, you're saying Texas, which is one of the reddest states in the union, Texas wanted to label food that was banned, and the federal government is trying to tell Texas, no.
Well, let me get the details on this clear. Texas did pass a bill requiring food companies to label ingredients if they're banned in other countries, and the food companies are trying to get a federal law. Okay. Now, they've not been successful yet, yes. But RFK made comments to the article that I wrote. He made comments to a Bloomberg reporter that were really against what he's been saying in public, in my view. He's been going around to these state legislatures at press conferences praising the state level actions, encouraging governors around the country to get behind bills for food safety. It's a really important way to hold the industry accountable, and he has held the line on that publicly. But just recently he said, well, we're talking to the food industry and everything's on the table, including a national federal standard, because state laws are so burdensome. Now, that's straight up industry talking points that he was parroting when he...
So, to be fair to RFK, he's dealing with a freight train that he's pulling the brakes on. And I think that, for him saying that, he probably has to throw a bone to that lobby to some degree, or like work them PR wise. But hopefully, if there is a national, because you also have to consider, I'm like, think about the poor corporations. If all these states have different laws, they have to make different packaging or different food for different states. So the other side of it is, why not just do it for every state at that point? Just do the same thing in every state. It's kind of like, I don't really feel bad for you guys, but in RFK's defense, what he may suggest is like, hey, why don't we take Texas's law and make it just a national thing, so it applies everywhere. And if the laws are strict, maybe it's okay for them to do it. I still don't think that they should restrict state level action either, though. I mean, that's kind of what makes America awesome, is the separation of powers and the ability for kind of states. I mean, every state has kind of its own culture and then subcultures within that, and I think that's it's the same thing with countries in Europe, and you know how it is. I'll show
said that. What did he mean by that? I reached out to ask. He hasn't clarified his comments yet in public that I've seen, but we just wanted folks to know about that. Okay, he said this. It's concerning, and we need to really make a strong stand.
And this, to me, is okay. And so again, going back to RFK and the criticisms against him, this is a legitimate thing to hawk him about, right? He said this. He better fucking be legit about it. He better not sell out to the food companies. Because that's the reason he's there. And people like her and the Maha movement have backed him. Whether or not he had sex with a certain person, or he likes falconry, or he did drugs once in the 80s, I don't give a shit. This is real political journalism / commentary right here. legitimate.
And that the federal government should not stop states from passing environmental health protections to clean up our food. I mean, that's what the key constituency of RFK wants, is safer food. And what we know from hundreds of years of experience, I mean, these companies are not going to do it on their own.
Right.
They're not going to, they didn't take lead out of gasoline. They didn't take lead out of paint until the government made them do it. And so we do need laws. We need government agencies to be looking out for health and safety because companies are not going to do it on their own. Any kind of change is too expensive. They're not going to do it until we make them do it. And the only mechanism that we have is government laws and policies. So
So I
also not buy the crap, and we should also do that.
So from like the big food perspective, they're sitting there thinking, oh, great, if Texas did pass this law. So now we have to stick on our food labels that, this is banned in certain countries. But we don't want to put that on all the labels. And that's only a law in, let's say, 5 states. So we're going to have to change the labels for 5. So if each state passes their own laws with different labeling, they're sitting there thinking, well, then we have to change the label for 50 different states. Like we might have to have 50 different labels kind of a thing. Or, worse, they could do one label that really has everything and they could just stick that on all the products. But then if you don't have to disclose it in a different state, why would you? Right? Like you might lose consumers if you disclose it in one state or the other. So they want a label for those states. So they're sitting there thinking, because really the smart thing to do would be what the car makers do, for example. Car manufacturers, when a law gets passed, then they modify the car and they sell it that way pretty much everywhere. They're like, well, that's what we do, right? But the big food industry is saying, well, but if I don't want to have to sell with a label saying this food might be dangerous in a state if I don't have to. So it's just going to be burdensome. And so we don't want to have to. So let's just make it so we don't have to do it at all. I mean, that's kind of what they're saying.
Sure. Yeah, they don't want to make change. The wise move, I think, would be to say, hey, these ingredients have a lot of science showing that they're toxic to kids. Why don't we make our food without them? Like we already do in Europe and other countries in some cases. We've had like toxic dyes in
because it's
cereal.
more expensive. Why would we care more about human life than money? That is the core differentiator between people like me and a lot of other people. And that is, I value human life over anything fucking material or monetary. If a baby's going to die and $1 billion surgery will save it, fucking spend the $1 billion. Who cares? It doesn't matter. And that is the problem with America. Everything is a fucking money grab scam to the point where they'll continue to poison us unless we make them stop. Secretly poison us. I think about this all the time with the food stuff because in our era, my era, I'm in my 40s. So growing up was like the golden age of like Little Debbie and Hostess and all this fucking processed food and Kraft macaroni and cheese and the microwave. And it's also the byproduct of that era is cancer in everyone. And I watched my elderly relatives, like my grandmother and my aunts and people I know pass away in hospital beds being fed the most disgusting, toxic slop. Where if they had been actually fed, good, healthy, nutritious food, they might have actually recovered and lived a couple more years, So it's disgusting to me, especially when you look at, the types of food that they feed children in like cafeterias and, hospitals, like sick people in hospitals. It's the cheapest, like particle board garbage, processed garbage that slows your immune system and makes you fatter and more diabetic, where we could probably save many more lives much cheaper if we just changed the dietary structure of hospitals and medical care facilities, And this is very clear now.
Here that are not used in other countries. And so the food's a little brighter. Do consumers really care about brighter food, or would they rather that their kids don't get ADHD? I mean, the food industry has for so many years just straight up ignored science that is so strong that ultra processed foods are harming our health in many different ways. And they need to clean up those foods. And I think that would be the wise move.
You're
reaction to these state laws.
Yeah, I was thinking, how are we going to change the label a million times? But really the smarter thing to do is just get the food out. And how about just change it out to what you have to sell, how you sell it in Canada, for example, like the Fruit Loops.
Like she said, the car companies have to do this. If there's a state law that they have to do something in a car, they just have to do it in every car. And suddenly that's one of the reasons, despite the hate that California gets, a lot of the modern technology and advancements in economic, and less pollution and stuff came from California. Because back in the 70s, California, LA had way more smog and pollution and shit in the 70s than it does now. And there's more cars on the road, Let me let them close this out.
I mean, I think we all remember the Fruit Loops example, and that's why are Fruit Loops so? What's even crazy about the Fruit Loop thing is it's like you don't even see the actual Fruit Loops when you go and shop at the store. So it's only what you see when you pour it into your bowl.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, why do you need it to be bright and colorful? I mean, kids are going to eat whatever you stick in front of them. You know, they're going to eat the Fruit Loops that you stick in front of them. And I don't know if they're going to say, "Wait, Mom, these aren't as bright," and so I don't want them. You know, I don't want this. I don't want this pastel Fruit Loop. I want the bright stuff. Give me the neon Fruit Loops. You know, and then Mom is sitting there and go, "Oh, well, I'm going to have to cave to my kid and give them neon Fruit Loops because they make them." I mean, it's okay, or be a good mom and not feed them that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't understand what the food industry's thinking. I don't. They're not responsive to consumer concerns in any way. And so
it must just be it's cheaper. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of with all of this.
That's the answer to everything. Everything in this country that's broken is broken because some asshole is making a bunch of money off it staying broken. And you can take that to the fucking bank. That's every goddamn thing that's broken in this country. So that's about all I have for you today. You're going to probably see me on here a lot more frequently, bringing news and commentary. I did have one more story, but it was a little bit of a story that I was kind of like iffy on doing because it's kind of critical of other podcasters in the space. And I decided against doing that because it's not my style and I don't need to do that to have an audience. So I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to close you out today with one of my famous song parodies, or there's some of them aren't even like song parodies, they're just kind of like things I made. And I've been thinking about this one a lot lately because I think that people like Alex Jones or even Dinesh D'Souza actually reminded me of Rachel Maddow. He's like the right-wing Rachel Maddow. Like he's a good intellectual liar, so I'm going to take you out today with my Rachel Maddow conspiracy, anti-Russian COVID conspiracy theorist rant. And thank you for jumping on. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for listening to me rant. And we'll be back again tomorrow, hopefully earlier. But I'm going to start seeing me on here a lot more. So I look forward to engaging with y'all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Take good care out there.
Rachel Maddow's take on the recent anti-war rally.
Okay, hold on a second. False alarm there. That was not the right video. I can't do that to you. I got to give you the real Maddow clip. That's like a short version. I got to give you the full Maddow federal agent remix. Okay, sorry about that. That was false start, false end. One more time here. Here's Rachel Maddow with the federal agent remix, and we'll see y'all next time. Take good care out there.
And I mean truly random rally on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A rally in support of Russia, I guess, given all the Russian flags. At least a rally against the U.S. supporting Ukraine in trying to stand up against the Russian invasion of their country. This was a tiny event. It was small. It was a weird assemblage of Americans. There were Proud Boys there. There were Proud Boys there. Anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists. Tucker Carlson? Cryptocurrency promoters. There were a lot of people with Russian flags, also the occasional flag of the former Soviet Union. There were anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists, a lot of them. It was a really weird group. It was a small rally and a weird one. But that's what it looks like. That's the assemblage of short straws and split ends and loose change and loose electrons that's advocating in this country that Russia's in the right in this war and America should be on Putin's side as he keeps invading other countries. There were anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists, a lot of them. There were Proud Boys there. Anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists. Tucker Carlson? There were Proud Boys there. There were Proud Boys there. People with Russian flags. There were Proud Boys there.